All right, Sooner Nation. So, depending on what your expectations were for the offseason, this news might or might not shock you. Obviously, you guys have seen the title, but since sitting down to record this video, we've seen even more players from Oklahoma start to make their decisions on whether or not they want to be a Sooner going forward. And this is huge. This is significant news. The guys that are hitting the portal, they're not small players. They're not guys that haven't played for Oklahoma. They're guys that Oklahoma potentially had high hopes for, and guys that, they wanted Oklahoma to make an impact. So this is going to be interesting to see how Oklahoma goes to navigate the transfer portal, not only in losing some of these guys, but how they're going to go replace some of the talent they're losing. So today we're going to kind of talk about all of it. We're going to encompass the guys that are leaving, and we're going to talk about the guys that maybe Oklahoma should try to go out there and get at these positions. So before we do that, join the discussion, jump in the comments below, give me your thoughts, because Oklahoma loses a OU legacy player in Nic Anderson. If you guys remember, his younger brother, Rodney Anderson, played here at Oklahoma, and for what it was worth, he had a really successful career here. But Nic Anderson, who was this year, I think would have been a sophomore, if I remember correctly, a redshirt sophomore. Nic Anderson was kind of, a lot of people had high hopes that he was going to have a breakout year after last season. Nic Anderson really made a name for himself. And when I say that, everybody remembers the Texas game. That is the game that everybody goes back to and watches and says, that's what I remember from Nic Anderson. That's where Nic Anderson came onto the screen, onto the scene. Now, understanding this for Nic Anderson, he is going to be the top or one of the top wide receivers in the transfer portal. He's 6'4", 220 pounds. Last year, 38 receptions, 798 yards, 10 touchdowns. This is a major loss for Oklahoma because you were kind of hoping that, if Burks goes to the draft, if you can get Farouk to come back, you can get Jaden Gibson back next season with Anderson, you potentially have a really strong wide receiver room still. But I think this is kind of all starting to fall apart. I think, you saw a lot of people throughout the year say that these players were holding out because they didn't want to be here anymore because the season was bad. And that's not the case. You can point to what a lot of people are talking about on social media regarding the medical staff. We're not going to dive too much into that outside of just the medical staff needs to figure it out, whether that's Oklahoma moves on from them or, they make some internal changes. Something has to happen here because you can't keep losing players. And not only that, but just not having guys on the field consistently. But that's where I think some of this comes into this for Oklahoma. I think a lot of Oklahoma fans are going to wish Nic Anderson the best and hope that he can go ball out somewhere else. But at this point, if you're Oklahoma, you've got to look at the facts and just say Nic Anderson hasn't put up a full healthy season for Oklahoma. Like, you need him to be more reliable. You need to potentially bring somebody into this room that can be there for you game in and game out. And that's not something we saw this year in this wide receiver room. So there's also another thing that I want to point out here. Obviously, these guys can enter the portal and not leave. Obviously, they can enter the portal. At this point, it allows them to go out there, talk to other schools, and see if there's something else out there that would interest them better. But and the other thing is here, if you notice the wording, there's a plan to enter the portal and a guy is entering the portal, right? There's a chance that the portal opens up on Monday and Nic Anderson doesn't enter. Maybe Oklahoma and Emmett Jones and the staff are able to convince him to stay. I don't want to give your hopes up because the likelihood now is he's entering the portal. He's probably not coming back. But I just want everybody to keep that in the back of their mind. Just because the player enters doesn't mean they're gone. Doesn't mean they have to leave. If they want to stay and the staff wants to take them back, they can come back, right? That's always on the table. Now, outside of Nic Anderson, you saw the one and only Caleb Hicks, who every Oklahoma fan under the sun asked why in the world he wasn't playing. After, we heard so many great things about him in the spring and things like that. He's entering the transfer portal with 3 years of eligibility. You saw Emeka Megwa enter the transfer portal. He's going to have 3 years of eligibility. Now, remember, he was a transfer from the University of Washington, so this wasn't even a guy that maybe you necessarily were expecting, through the recruiting trail to be here long term. I think just things like that. But talking about guys that you could use to replace wide receivers in the portal, right? I don't expect Andrell Anthony to be back next season. I don't see him. I just don't see it. I think the injuries were just too substantial, and I don't know if he portals or what he's going to do, but I just wouldn't expect it at this point. So I'm really looking at like Farouk and Jaden Gibson kind of being back. I would think Deion Burks is going to the NFL. I know other people think different, but that's kind of what I'm thinking. Deion Burks might be NFL bound. So if you're kind of looking at how do you rebuild this room, this wide receiver room, well, Dane Key is one of the best wide receivers on the market, and 6'3", 210 pounds, very similar to statistical wise outside of the touchdowns of what Nic Anderson was doing at Oklahoma. 47 receptions, 715 yards in 2024 and 2 touchdowns. 23, he had 42 receptions for 636 yards and 6 touchdowns, and 22, 37 receptions, 519 yards and 6 touchdowns. So this is a guy that I think plays, and again, like Nic Anderson, going to be one of the best wide receivers in the portal, and a guy that I think Oklahoma could potentially be interested in. I also look at guys like Casey Conception from NC State at 5'11", 189 pounds. Remember, you don't always need to go out there and get a ton of guys with size. You can go out there and get guys that are a little bit smaller just to kind of be like, route runners. If Jaden Gibson comes back and if he's healthy and if he's on track to be there, there's some size for you. Obviously, you still have a guy like Ivan Carrion in this class as well. You got another guy from Kentucky, Barian Brown, who's got this season 29 receptions, 361 yards, and 3 touchdowns. But throughout his career, he's been a guy that's gotten 500 and 600 yards on the receiving. And then I look at a guy like Micah Hudson. This is a guy I told you guys about earlier this week, that this is someone that Oklahoma is interested in. It's someone that I think Oklahoma has a really good shot for. He's only 6 foot, 195 pounds, but with Oklahoma losing production in this room, there is going to be opportunity for Micah Hudson to play right away, and I think that could be intriguing. You look at guys like CJ Daniels, who's 6'2". You see Eric Rivers, who's been a standout wide receiver for Florida International University. Kobe Prentice was a guy that Oklahoma had to play on the field against Alabama. You guys have seen him. You guys have heard of maybe a lot of rumors about Malachi Coleman when he entered. He's 6'5", 210. As a receiver, again, that plays. So although Oklahoma, could be losing some more guys, we're going to see more portal entries. It's just how it's going to work. Obviously, this staff has started having those conversations with their rooms with these players. So naturally, you're going to see more guys, whether they get processed out or they tell the staffs, hey, I'm going to go try to see if I can find something better for me in my future. You're going to start seeing this. So I think Oklahoma's going to be fine. Obviously, it's a big loss to lose Nic Anderson. This was a guy that, he balled out for Oklahoma. He gave it his all, just, on the wrong side of the injury train. And, you really hope that he can go out, he can ball out, find another place. Same thing for Caleb Hicks and Emeka Megwa. Like, you just, as former Sooners, you hope that they can go out and just ball out somewhere else and hopefully make a name for themselves. So, guys, if you haven't already, joined the discussion, jump in the comments below. Give me your thoughts on just what you guys think about the transfer portal and Nic Anderson. Like, that's a big loss for Oklahoma, and I'm curious to hear what you guys have to see about it.